Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We know that it's still pretty difficult getting to various parks throughout New York and the world right now. So we want to help by bringing one of our favorite parks to you, Central Park, through a bunch of different in-person as well as virtual programming. We're so happy to have you joining us today, whether this be your first virtual program with us or your 100th. We're so happy to be bringing the park to you through various different virtual tours, like our weekly walk that we're going to be taking today. Our weekly walks are 15-minute casual walks, taking us through different landscapes or topics throughout Central Park every Wednesday at 12:30. Like always, the photos you're going to see were taken here in Central Park over the past week by myself, with the exception of a few photos that I accessed through various databases like the Museum of the City of New York, as well as our Central Park Conservancy photo archives. Thank you again for joining us today for a weekly walk on January 12th, 2022. Accidentally put 2021 back there, but somebody pointed it out for me. But thank you again for joining us for this weekly walk where we're going to explore the South End to the Dairy with me, Ryan. Thank you again, everybody, for your support. We are the Central Park Conservancy, and we're the nonprofit private organization that cares for Central Park, helping to keep it clean and green, with our mission being to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Thank you again, everybody, so much for joining us. We do love the interaction we get with these virtual walks. So if you do want to say hello or share a favorite memory of any landscape in the park, but specifically the South End, please use the chat feature to let us know where you're joining us from or to share a memory. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and my colleague Jose will be on the back end answering any questions you may have. Last thing you'll see pop up are going to be some visitor polls that'll launch throughout the walk today. Once everybody has voted, I can share the results and we can see what we're all thinking. Now, without any further ado, let's start to jump into our walk today, South End to the Dairy. Now, we visited the South End a lot, and we've also passed by the Dairy a lot, but more recently, the Dairy, one of our 5 visitor centers, has undergone restoration. So we can take a little bit of time at the end of our walk to look at some of the new highlighted Dairy features, some of the ones that have always existed that we love, as well as some that we can't necessarily see, but help to improve the building. We'll see a couple fun things along the way, seeing the map that we're going to be taking of our route today. As we start our walk, we're going to begin right around 7th Avenue and 59th Street, otherwise known as Central Park South. And as we enter the park during this winter time, it is very cold here in New York. We were down to about the 10s or teens the other day. So we're certainly feeling the cold, cold, wintry wind, as well as the shade, because the sun is being blocked out by a lot of these large buildings. But as we enter the park, we're entering in at Artisan's Gate. Now, if you've joined us in the past, you've probably heard that there are about 20 named entrances throughout Central Park. These different gates would receive their names around the mid-1860s, but wouldn't be inscribed until these gates or entrances until about the 20th century. We're entering here Artisan's Gate, one of the different gates that's really categorizing different types of citizen groups. And very appropriate, we enter the park at Artisan's Gate because we're walking into what is probably without argument the largest public piece of art in Manhattan, Central Park. And as we walk in, we pass by this sign with a quote that I feel really resonates with me. By working in the park, I get to experience everybody's happiness with the change of the seasons. And that's one of the things I love so much about doing these in-person and virtual walks, is getting to share with you the park during every season, both the good and the bad, the warm and the cold. And as we make our way through the park, we come up to some of the first architecture we'll see on our tour today, Dip Rock Arch. Dip Rock Arch being one of the 30 bridges and arches we can find in the park today, and one that helps to just dip us underneath a carriage road traditionally used for horse-drawn carriages and bicyclists today. As we make our way under Dip Rock, we can go under this New England sandstone, granite, and red brick, making our way through this little cavern and coming out on the other side. And as we make our way just north through this archway, we'll pass through and start to see some sun finally hitting us, warming us up just briefly as we start making our way north in the park. We only get to enjoy the sun for a short time, but we'll see it very soon as we start making our way further north. But from this vantage point, we can see some sunny areas like the rock on the left, which is Umpire Rock, one of the more famous rock clusters here in Central Park. And we can see a bunch of people acting like lizards on a hot rock over there, enjoying the warm sun during this winter season. As we make our way a little bit further north, we can enjoy some of the other rock outcroppings we see in this area, some of them being a little bit more decorated with pine trees and different types of evergreen trees that'll add a little bit of color to the otherwise wintry landscape. As we make our way up and look to the left, we'll be passing by Hector Playground, the largest and first permanent playground to be put in Central Park in 1934. However, there's not too many people using it today since it's only about 15 degrees, but we can see more people utilizing the sunny rocks, which are providing great vantage points as well as an area to warm up. I always love seeing people climbing on the rocks because it puts into perspective just how large these rocks are and just how small they make us feel. If we zoom in a little bit, we can see a couple standing on top of the rock, taking some nice photos with Central Park South as their backdrop. But as we walk away from the buildings, we'll start noticing some more types of natural beauty, like many of the trees that always capture my eye as we walk through the park. As we come up to yet another arch, there's something I noticed before I really noticed the arch, and that's this tree. This is going to be an American yellowwood tree. And I see this right as we come up the path because there's things hanging from the tree. The American yellowwood is actually still holding on to some of these different types of fruits that are being produced by this tree. We zoom in a little bit closer, we can see that this tree does have a plaque, one of many that tells us both the common and scientific name of this tree, making learning a little bit easier, as well as allowing us to come up close and see some of those legumes which are produced from this tree. These little legumes, which we can see pictured on the right, typically ripen from fall and carry on into winter, and they'll have about 4 to 6 seeds in them, which will provide a food source for quite a lot of different wildlife. This tree is actually more native towards about the Carolinas and westward, actually typically being known as a Kentucky yellowwood tree. But we would see this tree serving quite a lot of use in ancient America. Native Americans would use this very hard wood for different types of buildings and carvings. And we'd also see the roots of this tree actually being used as a primary ingredient for early dyes from southern Appalachian settlers. A really cool tree that we can find throughout Central Park in small numbers. As we make our way away from the yellow dogwood, we'll walk underneath Drip Rock Arch. Drip Rock Arch taking us that much closer to our ending location for this tour, which is going to be the Dairy Visitor Center. And as we start to make our way through this arch, we can see a sign that the dairy is lying just ahead. Still have a little bit more to go to make our way to the dairy, but we'll start continuing through. And as we make our way through the path, I'll actually launch our first poll, which is, what visitor centers in Central Park have you visited? We actually have 5 visitor centers. You'll see them all on here: the information kiosk at Columbus Circle, Checkers, the Dairy, Belvedere Castle, the Charles A. Dana Center, or other, because we also do have some information kiosks, which aren't really visitor centers, but we still have to include them somehow or another. As we make our way a little bit more east now in the park, we can come up to a very famous winter landscape. But before we make it there, we can take a quick glance to the left and see Chess and Checkers, one of 5 visitor centers we just mentioned on that poll, nestled just on top of the hill, getting a little bit of that sun. As we make our way just to the opposite side of Chess and Checkers, we can see a big little pavilion area, or a big little open sun deck area that has a lot of people's attention. As we make our way over, we can see what's drawing such a crowd. Probably the best winter activity to do in the park: go ice skating. Here we can see Walman Rink, which opened around 1950, coming as a generous donation from philanthropist Kate Walman. If you've ever visited Prospect Park in Brooklyn, you may have also noticed another Walman Rink that existed there. That one would actually come after Kate Walman's death and be donated by the Walman family. But we see this one predecessing it and still serving a use here in Central Park today, providing countless New Yorkers as well as tourists an opportunity to ice skate with the beautiful Central Park South backdrop. And what I love about coming to these areas is everybody's enjoying the fun recreation activity, even little birds. We zoom in a little bit, we can see this bird, one of many, hanging along a little private viewing area and enjoying us doing a little bit of skating. Just like we like to do a little bit of bird watching, it goes both ways. As we continue making our way around this area in Walman Rink, we're going to start heading up now to the dairy, coming that much closer to our ending location. And as we make our way up the path, getting a little view of the dairy here, I'll start to end that visitor pole. And actually, no surprise here, it looks like a lot of people have made it to one of the most magnificent and whimsical visitor centers in Central Park, which is going to be Belvedere Castle, located at about 79th Street and Mid Park. No matter what visitor center you go to, though, you can find something interesting, whether it be an historic building here in Central Park or one that serves a really interesting use, like the Charles A. Dana Center, which rents out free binoculars, children's discovery kits, lawn games, as well as fishing poles, all for free. So plenty of fun stuff to discover at some of the 5 visitor centers that can be found throughout the park, as well as some of the other areas like our visitor kiosks. There's also been other areas that you may have visited that were once visitor centers that are not anymore. Did anybody know that Tavern on the Green was once a visitor center operated by the Central Park Conservancy? If you didn't, now you do. As we continue moving along now a little bit towards the east, we'll see that Japanese pagoda tree here, having a little bit of that yellow golden color from some of the kind of string bean-like fruits that are produced from this tree. As we make our way east, we can trade some of the views of trees for some of the views of the magnificent rocks that sit in this area. This one being one known as Cat Rock. Cat Rock getting its name because at one point there were some documented feral cats back in about the 70s and 80s that were noted living under this rock today. While you won't really find any feral cats in the park today, there's certainly a lot more appreciation for wildlife and the natural habitat. So we do see a lot of those feral cats having found homes. As we do make our way up along the side of this beautiful rock face, we can take a nice casual staircase, or if we're feeling more adventurous, we can climb it. And looking over along the face of the rock, we can see some of these white marks, which are coming from bouldering. Bouldering basically being rock climbing, might not need a very vast mountain to climb, but rather have even a small, moderate 5 to 10 foot rise that just has really difficult or nuanced handholds. It's not about height for bouldering, but rather about how you make it up. We can see bouldering being done on several different rock croppings throughout the park with the telltale signs of those little chalk or powder marks, which will be used to help climbers get a grip as they're going up these rocks. And these rocks are really amazing. They're Manhattan schist, which are about 450 million year old rocks, the bedrock of New York City, and actually the second oldest of New York City's bedrock. The oldest bedrock you'll find is going to be Fordham Gneiss up near Fordham and the Bronx area. But Manhattan schist is going to be a close second for the oldest bedrock in New York City. As we make our way to the top of the rock, we can see why everybody is walking or climbing to the top. A beautiful view looking over Walman Rink, Central Park South, and of course, a lot of the beautiful both evergreen and deciduous trees that blanket the landscape. As we make our way just a little bit north, we can see what we've really been working towards. We've been making our way towards the dairy. And as we come up to the dairy, we can already see a lot of beauty from it with that sun just shimmering on it. As we make our way up the path a little bit more, though, we can also talk a little bit about the changes the dairy has recently seen. We have shown a little bit of photos in the past weekly walks in this area that has kind of documented some of the restoration we've been doing on the dairy. The dairy actually started its restoration around September 2020 and finished up around November 2021. Of course, a lot of work was done during that time. One of the main things, beautifying it back up to its original color and original glory. As we make our way past, we can also note that this is not the first restoration that we at the Central Park Conservancy would conduct on the dairy. The dairy and many buildings in Central Park has really shifted over time in their care and their look. The dairy would originally open around 1872, but by about the 20th century, we'd see a lot of damage occurring to it. We'd see around the 1950s, the big, beautiful wooden loggia out front being removed, and we'd see this building being turned into a storage shed, which we can see pictured here. And around 1979, it would be restored. Around the early 1980s, that loggia being brought back by us, the Central Park Conservancy, and eventually it changing into a visitor center and being open to the public. We, of course, have a very different looking dairy today, especially after our most recent restoration, which not only included fixing up the outside of the building, but also offering an accessibility ramp, which we can see pictured here, as well as an accessible entrance to the Dairy Visitor Center. Coming down, we can also see just how beautiful and shiny the dairy is, looking very fresh and new, as well as very much how it did when it would originally open. We can see some of these historic photos, like this one from the Byron Company from 1898, which shows the dairy about 16 or so years after, about 20 years or so after it would originally open, but looking really beautiful after a fresh snowfall, a sight that we can hope to see in the coming weeks. But as we continue a little bit closer, we can look up close at the dairy and admire some of the beautiful definition and detail that was recently completed. During that restoration, we did a lot of things like, of course, repairing, cleaning, and repointing the exterior masonry. We can see a lot of that nice schist used for the roof, as well as for primarily a lot of the building itself. Nice gray stone looking like it's just rising out of Central Park. Beyond that, we'd also replace and waterproof the roof, so when it rains outside, it doesn't rain inside, as well as add new windows and doors. Of course, a big feature of the restoration was bringing back to life this beautiful wooden loggia. The beautiful wooden loggia, which basically appears as half the building itself, is certainly an immaculate one, and one that's really special. And these photos certainly do not do justice to really the immaculate color that is presented from this loggia. But this loggia, or an outdoor pavilion area, offers us beautiful little areas to sit and recharge, either blocking out the hot summer sun during the summer months, or blocking out some of the cool breezes during the winter season. But regardless of the time we come and spend here, we can enjoy beautiful views looking over Central Park South, seeing some of the present day views with the sun cascading on us, as well as reflecting on some of the views we may have got back in the late 19th century. Looking back at a photo like this, we can see this one coming from about, I believe this is the late 19th century, around the 1890s, about 1900 or so even. But we can see this being the south side feel, a view that we would even see from sitting on that bench, seeing children playing on this low-lying landscape, as well as seeing buildings that no longer exist, like this one on the right, which is the Children's Cottage. This area originally and still today serves a lot of use for children. The dairy, you may have guessed by its name, originally offered clean, reliable drinking milk for children to use, because during that time, you can imagine it was pretty difficult to get clean drinking milk. So during that time, dairies would pop up throughout New York, offering different types of beverages, as well as, again, clean drinking milk, ones that were void of alcohol and swill properties. So we would see this really serving a great use, as well as also renting out toys for children to play with on some of the surrounding comforting lawns like the one we can see here. As we look back at the dairy presently, some of those features, of course, have still remained. We still have little water fountains with stools to bring the children up a little bit closer, as well as some visitor centers like the Charles A. Dana Center and Chess and Checkers, which rent out free materials for kids and adults to utilize here in Central Park. As we take a little look from the south, I want to launch a last poll as we start to come to our the end of our walk today. And this is just a simple kind of silly one. Have you ever seen a cow in New York City? There is actually somewhere you can see a cow in New York City, and I'll tell you that answer in just a little bit. But for now, we can enjoy the beautiful view of the dairy. Any time of the day is great, but I love when we get that golden hour sun coming on and blanketing the dairy, adding a little bit of kind of swoosh to it, or I guess a little bit of kind of color to it in contrast with the trees and the branches just kind of shadowing over the top of the roof. But now what we can do is actually take a little bit of a look inside the dairy. What we can see here is a picture from about 1979 after the dairy would receive an internal restoration project, and right around the time it would start to become a visitor center. We would see the following year in 1980, the Central Park Conservancy forming, as well as completing in the next year or two our first restoration project in the park of the Dairy Visitor Center, restoring that loggia and bringing this back up to a fully functioning visitor center open to the public. We, of course, would see the dairy shifting up a little bit over time, and today the dairy serves as a gift shop primarily, as well as offering information inside. Some people are always a little inquisitive as to why there might be a gift shop in a park. And that's because we all really perceive things differently. And when someone like me might think of a park for hiking and for nature, other people think of it as an architectural hub, an area for socializing, an area for coming together with people, maybe going to a concert, maybe even getting a souvenir to remember the park. So certainly the idea of really what a park is and what it's used for has changed drastically over time. And because of that, it's proper to be all inclusive and allow everybody really something, even if it's getting a little bit of a souvenir to remember your trip somewhere. And the great thing about these little gift shops that we have in some of our visitor centers is that all of the profits and money go back to supporting the park. So any souvenir you get will be helping to keep those squirrels in a healthy habitat, those trees thriving, as well as beautiful architecture and history alive here in the park. As we look up, we can also notice again a new roof that does not leak when it's rainy outside, but still keeping a lot of the traditional views and setup that we would originally see in the dairy. And also appreciate about these buildings are again their connection with nature, having a lot of big open windows that tend to show us that the park is just outside and that we're still in a more natural environment, even if we're in a little building over here. And no matter where you enjoy the dairy from, whether it be from inside or outside, it's something that was certainly always appreciated here in Central Park. Here's an original proposal for the dairy, which we can see that was included in the 1869 annual report for the Board of Commissioners. A really beautiful structure that certainly took the exact same shape we can see in its original drawing. But today, of course, the dairy, even before restoration and especially after, serves as a beautiful hub in the central end, one where we can learn a little bit about the park, get a map, potentially get a souvenir, as well as in views and the history that once existed in this immaculate building. And again, thanks to the support of individuals like yourselves and donors to the Central Park Conservancy, we can continue to do these wonderful projects, bring these historical buildings back to their peak and high points, and continuing them for generations to come. As we wrap up, I do want to share the results. And no surprise here, 85% of people have not seen a cow in New York City, but I'm sure you've seen milk in New York City. Not that it's all coming from any one cow, but you can find one cow in New York City. And it's actually located very close to the dairy. It is in the Central Park Zoo. If anybody goes to the Tisch Children's Zoo in the Central Park Zoo, operated by the Wildlife Conservation Society, you can see Manhattan's only cow. So if you haven't seen it, there's something on your bucket list to go check out here in Central Park, and not a far walk from the dairy. So certainly stop by and visit us here at the dairy. The dairy is one of our visitor centers, and it's open from Wednesday to Sunday, every day of the week, except for major holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day. But please stop in at one of our visitor centers, say hello, grab a map, and let us offer you some wonderful suggestions of things to see and do here in Central Park. Thank you again, everybody, so much for joining us on another rendition of our weekly walk. Here is the route that we walked on our walk today, in case anybody would like to do this walk themselves and bring it to life and see it for yourself. Again, thank you so much for your support, and we're going to continue to do plenty more weekly walks, continuing into this new year, coming up on year number 2 of continued weekly walks. Again, we're so happy to be continuing these programs, and we have plenty of other ways to stay involved, whether it be through these programs, in-person tours, or on our website. You can also check the chat box now, and my colleague Jose will drop some links. If you would like to do any shopping or see some of the products that are carried at visitor centers and gift shops like the dairy, you can visit our centralparknyc.org/shop link and get the full collection available there. And those are actually also shipped internationally too, just in case you can't make it to New York and you want to take a little bit of East Coast love back home with you. Once again, thank you so much for your support in attending these walks, donating to the Central Park Conservancy, and loving Central Park. We look forward to continuing these programs. And I will be leaving this room open for any last-minute questions that we didn't have time to get to. We look forward to seeing you next week as we continue our weekly walks. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.